All right, I'm using the same project that I had open before. I just deleted all the code from the click method. And I also went to that values.txt file and I changed its values. Now I'm using the values 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. All right, so we're going to read these values from our text file into an array so that we can do some things with the array. So let's begin by recreating something we kind of already did. I need to declare a constant to hold my size of my array. Now it's important with arrays, we have to declare a size to use them. And since we're not putting the values in and we're reading them out of a file, we have to know how big that file is going to be. So we know that there's 10 values in there because I just showed you the file. All right. Next, let's declare an array to hold our integers. So I'm going to say int array of numbers. I'm going to call it numbers equals a new array of ints with size, declaring how big the array will be. So this creates the new array object of the size that we told it and assigns it to this variable, and this variable is meant to hold an array of ints. Point to, reference an array of ints. Now I want to read, we've read files before, and you know we read files. We don't want to read past the end of the file or we're going to get an error. We also don't want to go past the end of our array or we'll get an error. I showed you that a couple videos ago. So I am going to declare an integer so I can keep count. Okay. I'm not going to use a for loop for the reasons I just talked about. I'm going to use a while loop, but I still want to keep a count. So I'm going to declare an index to keep count. So we have to open our file. We have to process our file. We have to close our file. Okay, so let's open our file first. I'm going to say stream reader. I'm going to call it input file equals file.openText. And we're going to open, we called it values.txt, and I can't remember if I capitalized the V. It is capitalized. So we're going to open that file that we had already created. Next, we're going to process the file. Actually, let me just jump down here so I don't forget. Input file. Close. Now, how are we going to process the file? We're going to use a while loop. So start with a while, and I'm going to process while my index is less than, excuse me, numbers.length. Okay. I don't want, if I'm going to increase this index each time in my loop, and I want to make sure I don't try to get an index that's longer than the actual size of my array. So numbers.length is the size of my array. I probably could have used size here as well, but this actually checks it against the array. So as long as we're not trying to read past the length of our array, and as long as we're not at the end of stream for our input file, we're going to keep reading. So those are the two things we have to check. We don't want to accidentally read past the end of our file, and we also don't want to try and do anything past the end of our array. Both those things are important, so they both need to be in the condition. Now, if our numbers in our file have less or more than 10, that could be an issue. That's an issue with arrays. We have to know sizes. It could be an issue if we're processing, doing calculations. If we think we have 10 numbers and there's only 5, we'll still be okay reading it in, but maybe we're taking an average somewhere and dividing it by the length of our array, and all those extra zeros will cause problems. Or if we think we're reading 10 numbers into an array of size 10, and when there's actually 12 in here, or there's actually only 8, and when we get to item 9, we could be at the end of our stream, even though we have 2 more numbers in the size of our array. There's just so many things that could go wrong. It's important that we check both of these. Okay. So while we're doing that, we will numbers.index. Okay. So we'll start with item 0, then item 1, then item 2 equals, and we're going to do an int.parse. Now, as soon as I type that, you should be thinking something. What would you think as soon as I type int.parse? There's a possibility that could fail. If our file has a space in it, or it has a letter instead of a number, or if there's a problem with our file, int.parse could fail, which means technically I should probably put all this in a try-catch block. In a production environment, I would. For this demo, I'm not going to do it right now. So we're going to do our input file .read line. So we're going to read a line of our file, and we're going to parse it to an integer, and we're going to store that integer in our array. And the one other thing I want to do is increase my index by 1 each time we read through the file. All right. So this is one of those cases. I know I keep going back to this, but I want you to understand. We know how many integers there are. Okay. And I've always said, if you know how many there are, you should be using a for loop. But in this case, it's important that we check these other two things. So that's why we're not using a for loop here. All right, that should do it. However, well, let's run it. Go. Go. Did it work? I don't know. Did it? Let's put a debug here right before we close the file and do it again. Hit go. And it definitely got down to there. If I look down here, numbers is an integer array of size 10. Okay. And there I can see item 0 is 5, item 1 is 10, item 2 is 15. And it definitely worked. It loaded our numbers into our array. We didn't see anything on the screen because we didn't put anything on our form. So let's do that. I think in the next video, I will create a method to display the numbers that are held in an array. I'll see you in the next video.